네, 다시 왔습니다. 이게 계속 새롭게 그 다음날 거를 읽다 보니까 또 끊어서 가는 게 좋을 것 같아가지고요. 모두 감사드립니다. 내일 예습 낭독은 바로 시작합니다. 지금 바로 뿅! 네. 모두 감사드리고요. 자, 그럼 다시 내일 거를 읽어보도록 하겠습니다. 네. 자, 내일은 Day 13 이게 되겠죠? Day 13 읽겠습니다. Day 13 읽어볼게요. 뿌뿌. Uncle. 자, 잠시만요. Uncle Katsuhisa lived in a house because he was different. He had big plans. First of all, he had inherited $2,000 from a man whose life he'd saved during World War II. World War II라고 읽기도 하죠. World War II. So, while he wasn't rich, he was better off than most of us. Second of all, he was studying with a friend to work as a lane surveyor. 끊어졌네요. Surveyor, which is where you measure and study land. He knew a lot about soil and mud and things like that. He did not want to work in a hatchery all his life. When we arrived at his house, my 6-year-old twin cousins, David and Daniel, were waiting with Auntie Fumiko. Auntie was a round woman with a round face, round tummy, and round calves. Even her hair was shaped into a big round thing in her head. Someday I planned to knock it over and see what was inside it. Uncle popped his horn and waved at them. We got out of the car and almost the first thing that happened was my auntie Fumi started shouting at the top of her lungs, "Katie wet herself! Katie wet herself!" I was so embarrassed that I burst into tears. Everybody laughed and David and Daniel shouted out, "Katie wet herself!" My mother said, "Katie wet herself." My father looked proud of me. He was proud of us no matter what we did. Later, when the other Japanese families arrived, we ate all night long. Salted rice balls, fish cakes, rice crackers, rice candies, and barbecue chicken. Rice balls and are called onigiri, and they were the only thing I knew how to make. To make onigiri, you wash your hands and cover your palms with salt. Then you grab a handful of rice and shape it into a lump. My mother made fancy triangle-shaped onigiri with seaweed and pickled plums, but I just made the basic kind. Someday, when I got older, I would have to learn to make fancy onigiri too, or nobody would marry me. 잠시 물을 가져오겠습니다. 죄송합니다. 왔습니다. We picked fruit off a peach tree nearby and listened to our parents talk about business. My father would be working as a kitchen sector, which he told us is where you separate the male chicks from the female chicks when they are still wet from being inside the egg. 죄송합니다. 너무 기침이 많이 나가지고 읽어볼게요. From what I could gather, we had to separate them so that the male chicks could be killed. They were useless since they couldn't lay eggs. Uncle Katsuhisa said that it might seem sad to kill them, but eventually we would learn to be kind farm kids. Farm kids understood the meaning of death. They understood how death was part of life. When he said that, my mother and Auntie Fumi frowned at him. They did that all the time when he was talking. That meant he had to stop talking. After they frowned, there was a silence. I looked around and saw Lynn playing with some kids closer to her age. Come on, she called, and I ran after them. Sometimes older kids didn't like me around, but Lynn always made them play with me. We played until bedtime, and that night Lynn and I slept on the floor in the living room. There seemed to be a million crickets singing around us. The half moon shone through the windows. My sister and I practiced our howling and barking so we could be able to talk to our dogs if our mother ever let us get any. Our mother came into the room to quiet us down. She looked tired and worried for some reason. In fact, she looked as if she might cry. So we settled down immediately. 여기까지입니다. 제가 계속 기침이 나와가지고 여기서 종료하도록 할게요. 여러분, 내일 또 만나요. 뿅!